This is Haven Space, a safe place for fantasies, brought to you by sex coach and researcher Sarah Perry.
Hi folks, this is Sarah Perry with Haven Space, and I'm going to be talking a little bit today about gender pronouns and about custom salutations, and those relate to words like Mr., Mrs., Miss, Mix, and I want to discuss why we should support each other in choosing the titles that we want for ourselves, and talk a little bit about my life and why I choose to go by the salutation Mix. So remember, of course, that gender is extremely fluid, as is biological sex. Our bodies are not easy to categorize, and we have forever been taught that boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. We have been taught that your biological sex cannot be changed and is not only immutable, but has been kind of gifted to us as it is, and that we have no choice but to kind of stick to what that is, even if we choose to identify or live our lives as a different gender. We still have that biological sex. But this is in fact not true. Medical doctors even will say that biological sex specifically is composed of many, many things. It's composed of your blood and how your blood sex chromosomes are organized. And there are many different organizations than XY and XX. And I will post underneath this video a link to a chart that can give you some different chromosomes. And just so you know, these chromosomal changes may be mutations, but just because they're mutations does not mean that they don't happen in nature, and does not mean that they don't happen often, and often enough for us to give credit where credit is due. So aside from sex chromosomes, we also determine biological sex through external genitalia, and external genitalia is super subjective when it comes to newborns especially, which is when people are given their biological sex. So the difference between a penis and an extended clitoris in neonatal babies is actually a quarter of an inch in measurement. And until pretty recently, until about 10 years ago, now about 20 years ago, a doctor could actually perform quote unquote corrective surgeries on babies without telling parents, to under the umbrella of not providing undue stress to the parents. But as we know, people have all different types of bodies, and intersex individuals are equally valid and equally deserving of intact genitalia that is capable of feeling pleasure, which does not happen when you go in and cut things up and slice things up to shape them in a way that is more convenient. So we need to radically advocate for the end of genital mutilation, especially under the pretense of corrective surgery, on children who are not getting a choice or a voice in this. Our voice must always be for pleasure. And if people have the ability to do all of the normal functions that keep them safe and healthy, like urinate and defecate, then there's no reason to go through and cut things up to make them convenient for society to understand, at the cost of probably a lifelong of equally fantastic pleasure, right? So aside from external genitalia, we also have internal sex organs, and their accommodation is much more difficult to see. A newborn comes out and we don't do an ultrasound. We don't open them up to see what their internal organs are like. And there are multiple cases of people going into surgery later in life as adults and realizing, oh, you had an ovary too, or oh, you had actually something that was considered a testicle that never dropped, but you were living life as the different biological sex, if you will. Aside from that, we have all of these external sexual characteristics, and they help us kind of identify who is a man and who is a woman in our society. And it is typically what we would tell our kids make someone a boy or a girl. Those things are more related to facial hair, jawline, things like an Adam's apple or an Eve's apple, if you will. Things like long hair, big eyelashes, higher cheekbones, and all of these things we have used to help us kind of differentiate who is a man and who is a woman. But know that there is an entire industry made up of telling people that their secondary sexual characteristics are not according to their sex and should not be used. So for example, like people like me that get electrolysis and laser hair removal on facial hair, I know men that grow less facial hair than I grow, and that is not related to having high testosterone. It's not related to being a woman or a man. It's actually related to the way my body functions, and everybody's body, especially depending on your heritage, where you came from, your different genes, those are all completely different. For example, the idea that men are naturally bigger and stronger than women is actually a flawed idea. I know a lot of women that are both bigger and taller than the father of my children, and I know men who are smaller than me, and I'm a very petite woman, and it varies from country to country. So if we try to make these kind of sweeping generalizations, we are essentially getting rid of people's credibility as a gendered individual just because they don't fit some kind of rule that we made up. A good way to think about it is a woman who has had a hysterectomy performed on her does not cease to be a woman because she doesn't have a uterus, right? We would never say that. It would be incredibly damaging, traumatic, disrespectful, and virtually an erasure of the person's entire existence. And that is the kind of language that we carry with ourselves when we say something like that the difference between a man and a woman is a penis and a vagina. So I want you to take really good hard looks as to why we think the things that we think about, the things that make us different. I want you to think about who profits, who benefits off of these kind of systems of social norm and oppression. And then have a little bit more freedom for people to describe their gender as they see fit. And lastly, when it comes to salutations, remember the hauntology, the whole existence of trauma that comes behind terms like Mr., a term that was at one point reserved for masters, slave owners, which is why they were called masters, turned into misters. And then Mrs., which was the wife of a slave owner. Additionally, all of the current research being done on the fact that women who use the term Mrs. instead of Miss in front of their last names are actually treated better at hospitals, receive better medical care, especially during pregnancy. I chose to opt out of the system that demands that I disclose my marital status as a sign of respectability politics for me. I chose to use the pronoun MX as a salutation for myself. I do not think that I have anything good or bad. I don't think that there's anything good that can come from me disclosing that I am a woman and that I have been married and carry a married last name inside of my rhetoric with other people and how they relate to me. I don't think it's necessary. Honestly, I think our society can do better. And this is kind of my small way of relating that into my story. So there are multiple gender pronouns, including new gender pronouns that you may never have heard of. And I just want you to do your best to respect people, even if you have a hard time actually remembering. It's okay to make mistakes. What is not okay is to think that those mistakes are no big deal. And it's not okay to erase somebody else's reality simply because it's not something we've known before. So thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time.